Hello, Gold Derbyites. Welcome back to another edition of Awards Magnet. I'm Deputy Editor Ethan Alter. One of the big stories out of the Golden Globe nominations this week was the surprise Best Actress nod for Eva Victor, the writer, director, and star of the Sundance Film Festival hit Sorry Baby. I spoke with Victor before the nominations were announced, and we're presenting our conversation now to cap off Golden Globes week. A little bit about Sorry Baby. The movie won a Waldo Salt Screenwriting Award in Park City and was acquired by A24, which released it theatrically over the summer. It tells the story of Agnes, played by Victor, a young professor at a small college in Maine who is still enduring emotional and psychological trauma after being sexually assaulted by a former professor and mentor. Divided into chapters, the film moves back and forth in time, showing Agnes before and after the incident that changed the trajectory of her life. Victor's co-stars include Naomi Ackie as Agnes's best friend Lydia, Lucas Hedges as Gavin, a neighbor who lives next door to her isolated farmhouse, and Louis Canchelmi as the professor that assaulted her. Besides their Golden Globe nomination, Victor has received a number of other accolades so far this awards season. Sorry Baby was up for Best Feature and Best Original Screenplay at the Gotham Awards, and received nods for Best Feature, Best Director, Best Supporting Performance, and Best Screenplay at the Indie Spirit Awards. It was also named one of 2025's top 10 independent films by the National Board of Review. Listen in on my conversation with Victor as they discuss their visual approach to Sorry Baby and reveal the original ending that changed courtesy of a note from producer Barry Jenkins. And be sure to revisit or catch up with Sorry Baby on HBO Max right now.
Something pretty bad happened to me.
Did it just happen?
No. It was a little over 3 years ago.
Well, that's not that much time.
I know this is hard to talk about.
Doesn't feel that you know that.
We know what you're going through. We are women.
What? I got a cat.
Whatever you need.
One of the things I think about just watching your film, obviously you're set in rural New England, but just that experience of like driving further upstate into the Catskills and passing by these sort of isolated farmhouses, and maybe it'll be dusk, the light will be on inside, and I was just kind of wondering like what's the story inside that house, and I think that's something your film captures almost, maybe intentionally, maybe not, but like that sense of like all these stories are happening that you don't actually that you don't know about, and really put me in mind of that. I don't know if that's something you've ever experienced just as you pass by these houses if you're ever in the wilderness and just thinking, wow, I wonder who's in there, what's their story.
Well, sometimes I think a lot of the times as I'm walking down the street, I think, oh my God, I have never seen your face before and I will never see it again. And just every time I pass someone, I'm kind of like, that's a new face for me. How is that possible that every face I see is like a new face that I'm never going to see again? It's kind of what you're talking about, but not really. But yes, I definitely, I think I grew up in a city, and so I have a very romantic idea of little cottages, and I think I also grew up watching like a lot of rom-coms, and there's a very cottage fantasy, sort of like the holiday fantasy.
Yes.
And there's a spooky element to it too, and I think I would love to live in a little house like that someday. I've never really lived in a house like that, but I definitely wonder about them, and I think about like how different that life is from how isolated that life is. And I've, obviously felt very isolated in different moments, but like that's a level where if you're isolated in your heart and you're isolated physically, that's a different level of isolation. I think it's very beautiful. And the film is set in Maine, though the shot where we reveal that is not in the film, so I understand why people don't know it's in Maine.
Right.
But I spent like a few months in Maine in the winter, and I was very inspired by how it looked. And I think there are many films that I mean, this isn't New England, but certain women had that sort of dark, gloomy, cold feeling to it. That film has that. Manchester by the Sea was very inspiring. So shooting in right outside of Boston to look like Maine and to just kind of look like this sort of New England fantasy nightmare scenario. The grays and the blues and the browns were I love that. I love the way that looks.
Right. Absolutely. Well, speaking of isolation, something I noticed rewatching the film again this time was just how whenever Agnes is outside, you shoot mid shot most of the time, and when it's from the back, big depth of field. So we see the remoteness between both
Right.
herself and people, between herself and houses. So that communicates in the outdoors. There's so much space between everyone, not
Yes,
just the houses but
thank
also
you.
people. And it definitely, obviously, that was a deliberate choice. I wonder how that speaks to the isolation theme that you were talking about.
Yeah, well, it was because it's a film of like I think there were 84 scenes that we shot and 70 of them were in or around the cottage. The cottage had to do a lot of work and I feel like this is very much Katie Birmingham, our production designer, did a really beautiful job at the house being and my DP Mia Chofi Henry and the whole lighting team of the house being a place that feels like a sort of cozy nest when Liddy's around, and this sort of darker house of haunting things when Agnes is alone. And to me, like the first 30 minutes of the film are about a friendship and about the closeness of a friendship. And so I felt like it made sense that they're sort of these two people in a shot together in this vast world where no one else is. And it's just this cozy sort of romantic thing of this big ocean, and it's just them two in this world. And then when Liddy leaves, the shot becomes even emptier, and like Agnes is alone with this big sky, and that sky becomes more foreboding. And this is also something that we worked on in the color because with Marcy Robinson, our colorist, because there's all these moments when Agnes is with Liddy, and we made those a lot warmer. And then there's like this one moment when she's outside after Liddy drives away. We're on this very big wide of her just next to her house, and there's the big sky. And we did this sort of magical color thing of the sky going from the clouds just covering her a little bit. And in the script, I think it says like a cloud passes over, and it's like what you can't really make that happen, but the feeling of it is there for sure, which was really cool to get to make that feeling of like big sky is beautiful until it's lonely.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's that real sense because at first glance you're watching like and you're like, oh wow, that's a beautiful landscape, but then you feel that oppression almost sinking in too, especially when Agnes is by
Right, that's
herself. Like, yeah,
good.
it's limiting at the same time.
Yeah, there's like I was looking at a lot of Hopper paintings when I was
Mhm.
making the film, and I felt like those big beautiful portrait, like just these big landscapes were just they're just so beautiful and so sad too. They're so lonely.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I noticed on this rewatch too, just in terms of blocking, Agnes and Preston are almost always blocked by something when they're together in scenes. There's the desk,
Mm.
there's the table, there's the desk. The only
Mm.
time they're kind of close, there's the door at the house, but the only time they're kind of close is when he's exiting the office, and then, but even then, there's chairs in the way. So you never really give it to
Wow.
them with that whenever there's in the same close to each other. And again, obviously the deliberate choice. Tell me about the blocking of those scenes and always keeping them apart in that way.
That's really interesting. I don't know if that's a deliberate choice. Well, I guess should say it is. But, I think so because Decker is only in three scenes, but
Mhm.
two real talky scenes and then one outside his house. So much work had to be done in those scenes to do many things. Like it's the only time we get to see Agnes before this happens. We get to meet her as the person she was before. It's also so important that we don't know he's a bad guy
Mhm.
and we understand why she would go into his house. And so like that whole relationship actually had to have a lot of chemistry in it, in my opinion. Like it had to have sparks and have this creative synergy in it so that we understand why she trusts him, why his opinion means something to her. We have to understand that he's handsome, that he's disarming in a lot of ways. So, and that they like the same things. They understand, they use the same words. They understand each other. So yeah, I mean, that's really cool to notice that there are things in between them. I mean, yeah, I think the idea is probably like they he's pretty respectful of like the teacher student boundaries anytime we see them, like, and they are very much in that world and in that setting. And I guess the breaking of that would be her coming to his house where any sort of um, social rules of space are violated. Um, but yeah, I wanted to shoot them very romantically. Like I wanted to shoot them equally so that we see their face as much. Like I wanted it to feel like equal partners because then something breaks later and he is no longer in the position of having the respect of a close up, you know. But yeah, that's really cool. I haven't thought about that. Oh my God, tell me more about what you noticed. I'm learning. This
Well,
is
this one again, I know you would have done in the editing room, but you drop out any soundtrack in on the day of the bad thing, and it's the only sound we hear is just the town and the cars going by, the traffic.
yes, yes.
There's no music in throughout that whole section, which is really good, and it brings to mind that idea of when something traumatic happens to you, you all you hear is you just remember little things of that day. And again, I wondered the choice to just leave the soundtrack bare and just the only sound being the street noise, the people going by.
Yes, I mean the sound design of that moment was very important to be um like in service of this how the story was being told at that moment, which is to stay outside the house, to keep it as minimal as possible. Um, I feel like there's this really careful line in films of like music is when music works, it's extraordinary. And I really, especially with this film, it was very important to me that the music's never telling you how you're supposed to feel. Like it's never leading you to. I didn't want to manipulate anyone with music,
Mhm.
and how music can make you feel in that moment. So it's yeah, it's very naturalistic. It's I think we brought up some of the car. We we heightened when Agnes walks back to her car. I think we heightened the crunch of the
Mhm.
footsteps. Um, the only line is like your shoes are untied, and then the car engine. There is a little bit of score that Leo wrote that overlaps with the sound design as Agnes is driving, and the engine sounds were really we brought them up, and there's a little bit of like a but it's really quiet. So this it was a moment when I feel like the score and the sound got to really sort of create something together. Yeah, no, but it was I wanted it to be bare because I feel like putting music on it is like someone from the outside trying to influence the moment when really the goal of that sort of whole run is that we are with Agnes emotionally and Agnes doesn't know what happened yet. Agnes is just trying to get home, so we are doing that too because we're not reflecting on how bad this is. We're just trying to survive to get home. So everything was in service of that being like of us staying emotionally with Agnes, not pitting her or coming in from above and knowing something she doesn't know.
One of the things I found myself wondering this time too is when Preston one, if he makes a conscious decision, and when that is, in terms of when he knows he's going to do this to Agnes, because I'm thinking about that scene in The Office where he's talking to her and looks at his phone and puts it down, like, and has this whole story about his ex-wife and why he has
Mhm.
to leave right then. Part of me watching it back this time was wondering, is that the hook? Is that when he lures it? Is that when he makes a conscious choice? In your mind, does he ever make a conscious choice to do what he does, or is it something that just the opportunity presents itself and he takes advantage of it?
You know what? You'll have to talk to Lewis.
Mm.
I think Lewis is I really do. It was such a relief to hand off these characters to the actors
Mm.
because there are things about them that I know and things about them that I am glad someone else had to decide.
Mm.
I think the most, I don't know. I think what I do know is that he doesn't show anything at any point.
Right.
So that's all that matters to me. I think this is somebody, I mean, his psychology is obviously to some extent interesting to me, but obviously because he's in three scenes, he is not the most psychologically interesting to me of the film. So I think this is probably, I mean, we find out later that this is somebody who has done not okay things before, at least. And I think this is probably a pattern of behavior that is not as thoughtful as like I don't really know how people who do this work.
Mhm.
But I do know that there must be some amount that doesn't understand. There must be some people that don't understand what they're doing is as violent as it is.
Mhm.
And so I've always sort of been of the brain that like, okay, well, this is somebody who is in a pattern of behavior they maybe know is harmful, but is not they're not as ahead of the harm. I think this is the big question on Agnes's mind and in the jury. I think the question of like how can someone do this, and that's why I included the section of Lolita that I included. It's like a moment when that I think Agnes would be very interested in where the narrator of Lolita, Humbert, is like has a moment, a flash of clarity that the person he's objectifying and violating is potentially a full person
Mhm.
who is like three-dimensional and has feelings and is a whole person, and then he's quickly like, no, 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 that can't be true. And I think it's probably a situation of not having enough empathy to understand that you're inflicting violence on a real person. And honestly, that's why I crafted the film in the way that I did, with the first section being all about the friendship. And we don't know what happened to Agnes before this, because I wanted to give us that time to fall in love with them as full people. Because I think we do have, unfortunately, this ability to really push away people who've been through this kind of violence and to make them one dimensional and to say, oh, that's just like a tragic figure that I want to look away from. And the film hopefully asks you to look at these people and love them so that when we go back in time, you can't dismiss their pain as something that's not happening to a real person. So a long answer for something.
No, no, that's great. Well, I do. I mean, you mentioned that you didn't always decide what you let the actors decide certain things for their characters
Exactly.
and have that. So, but in the case of what happened in that house, do you know what happened? Is what Agnes says what you want, what you know happened, or is there in your mind room for doubt? How did you want to leave that?
Yeah, I mean, what Agnes has happened, I think the film believes is what happened. Uh, I think in our world, we really don't get to go inside the house, and then what she says is how we hear what happened to people. You know, we hear from them, and and I liked that the film gives her the space and the time to talk, to say what happened to her in this very safe moment with Liddy and on her in her own time. So I never wanted us to be ahead of her inside the house, knowing what happened to her before she did. Yes, I believe that what she says is what happened.
In terms of shots, I love that you end. The last thing we see is a two shot with you and the baby in the frame, and that's our last image. And so instead of being isolated, Agnes has that person to talk to. Tell me about coming up with that last image in your head, and if that was always in your mind when you wrote the script, if that last image was always there.
Well, I have a fun fact, which is that we showed one of the cuts of the film to Barry and Joy, his editor, who were working on The Lion King at the same time.
Mm.
So that was cool that they were nearby. And in that, I mean, it was an early cut. In that cut, Agnes and the baby, Agnes says her speech, and then she takes the baby and walks off with the baby. And I mean, the idea was that we hold on the wide of the trees moving for like 2 minutes again, like the beginning. And the second the cut ended, Barry and Joy were like, "Does she kill the baby?" And I was like, "Oh
Oh my
shit!" It
Wow.
was like they were like, something very sinister is happening in
Right.
that time.
Wow.
I was like, oh shit, that is really helpful
Right.
information. And that was the last time the
Oh my
end of the
God.
film was something where now the film ends how the film ends. They are having a nice moment. We cut away. Um, so it wasn't always the final shot in my head, but I
Right.
think it was worth adjusting for the note we got.
I
Yeah.
can see that. Wow, I can't even
Yeah.
imagine thinking that. Like my brain would not go
Well,
there in general.
good, because I think maybe if you would, two very, very smart people had the same reaction upon seeing that cut. So, you know what? Like, I'm really
Right.
glad we had them.
Yes, exactly. To tell you, no. I mean, it makes
Yeah.
sense because again, like ending on that shot through the window is again emphasizing the landscape and everything. I see why you wanted that to be the
And no,
last
it's
shot.
just like, yeah, exactly. Right.
Right,
It's a
right,
good idea, but at the end of the day, the best idea is the one that isn't
right.
as sinister as that. So,
Exactly, where you're not
yeah,
thinking what's happening on screen. Yeah.
yeah,
And it does, yeah. And it ends so that the friendship transfers to the next generation, and these are going to be
totally.
friends too. Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
so nice. Exactly. Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, now I haven't heard that obviously since that day, and I'm very grateful I haven't heard that. So,
Yeah. Seriously. Yeah, you're not thinking anything bad. Sorry, baby
well,
doesn't mean anything else, but yeah.
the actual thing that the plan as we were shooting was that the end of every chapter ends with the characters leaving the frame and we
Mm.
stay and then we cut. There was like, you know what? There were all these ideas that you try and you're like, this is gonna be it. And man, the film humbles you.
Right.
But you know, that was it was meant to be part of a sequence of ending each chapter, but it didn't stick. Things got better, and so it didn't have to stick.
Thanks for listening to Awards Magnet, Gold Derby Podcast. Like what you heard? Leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Awards Magnet is produced by Andrew Merrill. Our logo is designed by Chelsea Sakura. Please like and subscribe to stay on top of all the awards news and email us at awardsmagnet@goldderby.com.